Wrapping it up here. We're celebrating Miles Copeland's amazing career, his memoirs, and of course, what he's doing now. Miles, I know you look fondly back at those late 70s, 80s run with the Police and the whole new wave movement with your brothers, and that whole scene with IRS Records, REM, and the Go-Go's, and so many great releases. But since then, you have shifted. I know you have the String Revolution now, an amazing group up for big awards. You've gotten into world music, Persian, belly dancing, and all that. What excites you about this, and what gives you some of the same familiar feelings that you did when you were pioneering those new wave days back in the 70s?
Well, my rule of thumb is always, look, do I like it or not? Or, and the reality is that if I like it, I figure, well, it can't be all bad. There's got to be some other people like it. Also, I look to the people around me that I'm working with. I have some very good people, and if they are really keen on something, I say, well, they're really keen, so they believe, so why not back them? And that was the case of Jay Boberg, who believed in REM when I was in the beginning. I thought REM was a little bit boring. I later grew into understanding them and like them, but in the beginning, I can't say that, I saw what Jay Boberg saw into them. And same as John Bevilacqua looked at the String Revolution and saw something in them. But I'm willing to give rope to people that I believe in,
Yes.
and I'll do it with an act. Like I will also give it to a person I believe in, like Michael Plenn, who is a radio guy, promotion guy. I don't know if you remember Michael Plenn back in the early days.
Yeah.
But this was a young, untried college radio promotion guy. And I looked at him as a little fighting bulldog. And I thought, well, if he's a believer and he's going to fight, I'll go with it, and he single-handedly made the Go-Go's go to #1, and he ended up being the #1 radio promotion man in America. But, who knew at the beginning? But we gave him a shot, and he proved that, he had that something, and I always went with my gut in a sense. If I believed that somebody really believed, well, I was prepared to believe too. What I didn't like was people who didn't really believe in themselves. So I always looked for people who really were believers in themselves. And often, I mean, the case of John Napolitano or Stan Ridgway or a lot of these others, or William Orbit, these were people that were brilliant. And sometimes they were little bit over the top because they really believed in themselves, Well, William Orbit went on to sell 300 million records, and Stan Ridgway is still one of my favorite artists. Johnny Napolitano is living out in Joshua Tree or something, but this is a person who really believes, like Belinda Carlisle and a lot of the other bands. I mean, I look at Andy Powell still playing with Wishbone Ash.
Absolutely. He looks fondly back at those days that you were managing his group, and he's still doing it with some of those gems that you taught him.
Yeah. So I mean, I say that a lot of the rules are, you make it up as you go.
Yeah.
But the main thing is you've got to believe in it yourself, and you've got to believe in the people around you. They've got to believe too. And if you've got a bunch of people that don't believe and you don't believe, it's going to fail.
Well, those attitudes have always been a great mentor to me, and I really appreciate you. We inducted you in the Indie Entertainment Summit a few years back in North Hollywood. I'm glad you could attend that. Talk about these songwriting retreats. You have this classic, historic mansion in France, and you've been bringing songwriters there, and I know a lot of hits have been created there. Tell us how all that started and how it works.
Well, the way it started really was a desperation on my part. When I bought this castle in France, and I thought, what the hell have I done? And secondly, I needed songs, and a lot of the bands, Wishbone Ash being one of them, were bands that were saying, well, they don't want to do a song unless they wrote it, they would only cut songs that they wrote themselves. So I figured, well, suppose I interjected a good songwriter who had hits behind them into a group, and they would then they would have participated in the writing of the song, but they wouldn't have necessarily written the whole song, And that was kind of the argument, So if I could bring a country writer in and put like a writer like Carole King together with an unknown writer, and together they would create this hit, that would be one way I would get songs, So I would invite major writers and unknowns and put them together. And the funny thing was, I mean, people like Keith Urban wrote with the Go-Go's. Why would a guy who was a guitar player from Australia living in Nashville doing country music meet two girls from the Go-Go's? He met them at the Castle, and he wrote the #1 song with them that went to #1 in the American country music charts. And that changed his life. Now he's married to Nicole Kidman. He's a big superstar in country music. But he got his start at the songwriter retreat, really.
Amazing.
But he didn't think he was really good enough to come here. And a lot of other artists were the same. Greg Wells, who is now a big time producer, who's doing movies and God knows what. I put him together with Carole King and with other, who's had a huge resume of hits, So sometimes you create these interesting combinations of writers, and the songwriter retreat was not necessarily about the songs you wrote that day, but you would make friends with people who you maybe write with later on back in Los Angeles or Nashville or wherever,
Yeah.
You would create relationships. You would see, it would open your eyes to the possibilities of different ways of writing songs and different inputs and different people that you could work with, And that was the kind of start of the songwriter retreat. And I've been continuing to do it now with ASCAP, and we've had, and for me, it allows me to sort of keep my finger into the, who's up and coming in songwriter world, and producer world. So it's actually been interesting for me, even though I don't now sign up writers myself and interject writers of my own into the mix. So I get paid to put the retreats together, and I get to meet all these different writers, and that's also very interesting. I mean, I like to keep my finger in the pie, so to speak. I like to know what's going on, even if I'm not related to them in some way.
Well, it's amazing. Another venture that is absolutely visionary. Our special guest has been the one and only Miles Copeland III, manager, exec extraordinaire, and the owner of that French mansion that he speaks from. Miles, always a pleasure. I love catching up with you. Best to you and your whole team. And we look forward to keep getting the word out on all your projects. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, happy to talk to you. And I'm always ready to talk. So if you ever want to talk to me again, pick a subject and let's talk. So good luck with your radio show and with your podcast, whatever. And we'll talk again.